The Perseverance rover has just successfully touched down on the surface of Mars. In this video, we're going to take a look at some of the first images taken by the rover, ask what will it be doing over the next couple of weeks, and when will the Ingenuity Helicopter first take flight? Let's talk about that. After a 7-month-long journey through interplanetary space, on February 18th of 2021, the Perseverance rover successfully touched down on the surface of Mars. Very quickly after reaching the surface, NASA was able to receive the first images from Jezero crater, as we can see here. Both of these images were taken by the hazard avoidance cameras, which are generally used to help the rover navigate around hazardous materials like sharp rocks. However, these are also the most easily accessible cameras on the rover once it lands, because many of the other ones are on the mast or haven't really been released yet. In fact, these first images are actually through protective film coverings. So essentially, once the rover lands, it quickly takes these images to try and send back before the orbiter gets out of range and we aren't able to see images until the next pass. But in one of these images, we can see the shadow of the Perseverance rover, which gives us a little bit more insight into which direction the rover is facing. From this image, they estimate that it's roughly facing southeast. And by looking at the other image, if we look off in the distance, we might be seeing the cliffside of Jezero crater. However, it could also be things that are on the lens cap, again, that is on the camera still, or also just dust plumes from after the rover has landed. So we really don't know what this is until we get more images from the surface. But after landing, the rover initially looks good with batteries at 95% and the power system is operating. But additionally, NASA also released more information about where exactly it landed on Mars. In this image, we can see the precise location of Perseverance relative to the entire landing ellipse. Now, this image just goes to show how far away we are from the river delta, roughly 2 kilometers from the cliffside that they want to be exploring here shortly. Now, in addition, we could take a look at this image. This tells us the hazardous areas that Perseverance didn't want to land. That's all the red zones. And you can see how difficult it was for this landing. However, Perseverance was successful and able to reach one of these blue regions, even surrounded by what could have been difficult terrain. So it's fascinating to see the entire entry, descent, and landing sequence come down to a successful landing in Jezero crater. So now that Percy has actually gotten to Mars, this is the beginning of its venture across the red planet. So what comes next? Well, one of the very first things that they need to do is figure out the exact orientation of the rover, or which direction it's facing on the planet. And you might be thinking, well, let's just use a compass. However, since Mars doesn't have a magnetic field, compasses don't work. So instead, they use something called a gyro compass, which essentially measures the rotational rate of the planet that they're on to try and figure out which way they're oriented. So over the first day or so, they're figuring out the exact orientation of the rover and can use that to help point their antennas in the right direction, so that NASA is able to communicate directly back and forth with the rover, rather than having to use orbiters. Now, some of the first days that Perseverance is on Mars are mainly just a checkup to make sure everything is okay, starting with the power systems, the thermal systems, and the communication systems. The power, making sure that it's generating enough power to continuously function, the thermal systems, making sure it's not too hot or too cold, and the communication systems to make sure that we're still able to talk to the spacecraft. Now, after those first checkups, they'll also be deploying the main mast. So once this is done over the first couple of days, we'll start to get better images of the surrounding area around Mars. And some of the first panoramic images will be exciting to see. Now, additionally, they're also going to be checking up on the instruments to making sure that nothing went wrong during the landing sequence. So if everything is functional and operating properly, then some of the real science can start to begin. But before they venture off into the river delta to start taking samples of the surface, they need to do a few more things. First of all, they have to make sure that the rover is able to actually roam across the surface by doing some test drives. They'll make sure that the rover's arm is also functioning properly, and these are all things that will take place over the next week or two. And then following all of these tests and making sure everything is a-okay, they'll start to move towards the test flight area, essentially where they'll be flying the Ingenuity Helicopter. So it'll take some time to get there, and I imagine it'll be in the next month or so. But once they find this test flight region and reach this region, they'll be able to deploy the helicopter on the surface, make sure everything is operational and going well, and then they'll do the first test flights, which are expected to happen over the next month or two, or spring in the northern hemisphere. So if you're following along, the Ingenuity helicopter will actually take flight before some of the first soil samples are collected. And this is primarily due to the fact that wherever Perseverance goes now, it has to carry the Ingenuity helicopter with it, since it's currently underneath the rover. So it actually has to be more careful when Ingenuity is connected to it. However, over the next month or two, it'll be exciting to see some of the results of the first test flights on Mars. After these flight tests take place and getting into the summertime in the northern hemisphere of this year, then the first soil samples will be collected. And this is mainly because it'll take some time to actually navigate to the first region of interest that scientists want to reach. So it'll be interesting to see what all actually happens, because again, this is just the current plan. Many things can change depending on what they see on Mars and which way they might actually want to go. Now this is a shorter video than normal, but I do want to mention that make sure you keep track of what JPL and NASA are announcing over the next couple of weeks, because they'll be releasing many animations of the entry, descent, and landing sequence. They'll be showing pictures of the environment surrounding the Perseverance rover. It'll be truly exciting for scientific exploration, seeing this entire new part of Mars for the first time from the surface. So it's an incredibly exciting time to be studying Mars and to be learning about what's going on. But with all that being said, I want to leave a question for you. What are you most excited about for the Perseverance rover and its exploration across Mars? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and maybe subscribing to this channel. But thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.